Ligger du bekvämt på den? With an NIP episode and a knuckle. Perfect planning. I've been quite ill for a few days and I haven't slept very well tonight, so my voice may sound like a big bag of shit, but I thought we need to get this thing recorded now that it's fresh. So the EU LCS is returning, and it's just a matter of days before we get to see some games again. And with that comes, as always, a lot of exciting news. One of the major talking points these last few days and hours, even at the point of recording this video, have been the fact that NIP, the Swedish esports powerhouse with a glorious history in Counter-Strike, looks to return to League of Legends. And they've done so by buying the Fnatic Academy slot, but they will take 0 players and 0 of the Cubses with that slot. A lot of people have criticized both NIP for thinking that this is kind of a douchey move, and a lot of people are criticizing the Fnatic Academy people. Kikis, Amazing, Cly, Mr. Wallace, and Cubs. Remember, Niski was already signed with an NA team when all this transpired, so he's not a part of this. But they've been criticized for being too loyal with each other, for basically saying that if you don't take all of us, you can get none of us because we want to continue playing together. I think, however, that both of these points of criticism seem to be quite off. Last night, at the point of recording, it was last night. Today is Tuesday, the 23rd of May. So basically like 12 hours ago or something like that, Cubs, the former coach of Fnatic Academy, live streamed himself talking about all the things that happened with the sale to NIP and why there are 0 FNA players and not a Cubs on that roster. So a few things that he mentioned, right, is Niski already went to NA, like we said. So he's that's why he's not a part of NIP. Like, he got an offer. He felt like, I don't want to sit around and wait to see if this happens when I've got a good offer paying me a lot of fucking money and I'm guaranteed to play League of Legends professionally. So I'm gone. Good choice. Like, anyone would do that. Probably. And then what we learned from the 5 people remaining, 4 players remaining, and Cubs, NIP contacted 3 of those players and offered them deals in the Ninjas in Pajamas League of Legends roster. And one that they didn't want was Cubs himself. He felt comfortable to talk about this because it concerned himself. He did not mention who the other person was that wasn't contacted, so we don't know for sure what player wasn't wanted by NIP. The thing supposedly was that these 3 players that were contacted were supposed to play with 2 other players, one of which would replace the FNA player that wasn't contacted, and a coach that in their eyes would replace Cubs for them. And that coach is Nico the Pico. And what Cubs implied, or pretty much said outright in his live stream, was that these 3 players said, well, hell no, we are not playing under Nico the Pico. We've been in Fnatic now. We've seen how well he can do. Also, the player that they brought in to replace the player they didn't want was not good either. Like I said, we don't know who the player is that they didn't want. I kind of feel like it would be Kickers or Amazing, because if you got a chance to pick up a bot lane, a duo that you know works, if you can get that as a package, you would want to do that, right? And one of Kickers or Amazing. Now, Cubs did say in this live stream that he thinks in another segment, he was talking about like the public perception and the perception within the scene of these people in the Fnatic Academy and how weird he thinks that it is. And an example was that he thinks it's fucked up that he didn't say fucked up, but that was the spirit of it. He thinks it's fucked up that a player like Amazing couldn't get offers, and then he added offers that he felt was worthy of him or something like that. I don't know if he added the second part there to cover up that this was the player that wasn't offered a deal in NIP, or just because that's what it was. He the only offer that Amazing got was from NIP, and he thinks that that was a shit offer, so he didn't take it. Now, the one thing talking for that Kikis is the one player that they didn't want, is that the top laner that they now have is a Korean import that was formerly a sub for SKT T1. Yeah, I definitely go with a Korean import that used to sub for SKT T1 over Kikis. If you're just talking individually, on the other hand, you know you get a package deal with players that work very well together, and Kikis was a fucking beast on Fnatic Academy, so it feels kind of weird that you do that. When you don't know when things happened, right? It could be that all these players said no, and then they managed to get the Korean. Because if the three players are Amazing, Clyde, and Mr. Wallace, and they're saying, oh, the two players that we're going to play with are Nagne, formerly KT mid laner, Nagne, woohoo, good fucking catch for NIP, and what's his name? Is it Profits? I forget. The former SKT sub. If you're going in as a trio with those two players, is that really the downgrade that you're talking about? No, we're not on this team because Nico sucks, and we don't want to play with this Korean guy in the top lane because we think he's worse than Kikis. Like this guy's probably individually really fucking good if he was offered to be a sub for SKT T1. So I'm kind of still leaning towards the fact that it might be Amazing that wasn't offered a spot, because the jungler that Nip has now is Shook. And if I'm Clyde, Mr. Wallace, and Kikis, and I'm saying, okay, we can play for Nip under Nico the Pico with Nagne, yeah, who's good, if they knew that Nagne was coming at that point, and with Shook in the jungle instead of Amazing, I'd say, oof, I'd much fucking rather play with Amazing. That seems more reasonable. If the Cubs version of this story is true, it feels more likely that Amazing was the one that Nip didn't want. But then you also gotta criticize why the fuck Nip would be so hard on Shook that they'd actually break up a roster that works. 4/5 of a roster that works. I mean, if they really didn't want Cubs, say, okay, we don't want that coach, we want another coach, a coach that we think is better, but having 4 players that we know work very well together, and to say that no, we want to break that up because we think that Shook is a great jungler. Shook has not proven to be a good jungler in a long fucking time. So it's all kind of weird. And granted, the only like behind the scenes info that we got, which is amazing in itself that we get behind the scenes info as fans and spectators and viewers, I mean, that's just amazing. But the only behind the scenes info that we get are from the perspective of Cubs. Whatever transpired, the reality of the fact is that Kikis without a job, Amazing without a job, Niski in NA, Mr. Rawless is contracted as the sub for Fnatic, Clyde without a job, Cubs without a job. So that's what things look like for Fnatic Academy. The only way to criticize those FNA players, if Cubs' version of the story is true, is that you could say that, well, wouldn't you just rather play on NIP this split than not play at all? It's a way to keep yourself relevant for those 3 players. Because they must have known by this point that if they say no to this, there aren't going to be other offers, other than potentially going at another run-through challenger. For NIP, though, I have to say that this is quite worrying. I mean, they have a roster now that consists of 2 Korean imports and 3 Europeans. Bottom lane is Hikyu, formerly of Giants, Sprattel, formerly from PSG, mid laner Nagne, jungler Shook, top laner. What is the name of this top laner? Let's find out, shall we? I'm blanking. It is Prophet. Yes, I was right. Prophet in the top lane. And Nico the Pico, the coach. Like, so let's start with the coach. I didn't hate a ton on Nico the Pico when Fnatic struggled, because I felt like this isn't necessarily just his fault, like from the things that we know from with an outside perspective. But Nico, now, after he left, things took an upward trajectory, and the fact of the matter is that he has not looked good in his last few jobs. And this is the coach that Nip went for. As to why they didn't want Cubs instead of Nico, I can't go into that. I have no fucking idea. But just isolated, if we're just isolating the Nip part now and looking at their roster, I don't think they have a very good coach. And the top laner Prophet, don't know much about him. I think I saw like 1 game of him subbing in SKT this split, and I don't remember if I think he was good or not. Nagne though, that's a really big signing. That's really good, and like the Koreans will have to carry, because the thing about these 3 Europeans is the bottom lane, they're getting Hikyu, who was formerly of Giants, a team that was relegated, right? And they're getting him with Sprattel of PSG, who didn't manage to qualify to the LCS. So they wanted to get the bot lane, the combined bot lane that did get promoted to the LCS, and got there by relegating the team that Hikyu was on, and instead they ended up with Hikyu and Sprattel. Now, these 2 players, they might be decent. I did not watch enough of PSG or Giants last split to be able to say whether they are really bad players or if just they were on bad teams. But they're definitely coming out with a worse bot lane than the one they hoped for from Fnatic Academy. And Shook, I mean, I didn't watch a lot of League of Legends in Season 4, but I realized that Season 4 Alliance is the reason why Shook has been talked about as one of the best junglers that EU had for a while. But since Season 5, I feel like he's been consistently overrated in the jungle. I've never, ever been impressed by Shook. So the 3 Europeans that you got here is a very weak backbone to build a team around. They are relying on these 2 Koreans, the way I see, to really carry this team and for this team to work really well together. And this is why it is so worrying for Nip, because investing in the League of Legends Championship Series is shaky just in itself. The fact that you can get relegated twice, not once, but twice each season, makes this a very questionable investment, right? Because you have a matter of months to get things working well enough in order for you to not get fucking relegated and have that investment go to shit. And not only are you diving into a shaky investment, you're diving into a shaky investment with a shaky organization. So we have not seen Nip for a long time in the LCS, and I feel like unless this roster does way better than it looks like they will, their time in the LCS will probably be about as long as Heaton's time in Mästarnas Mästare was. I'm sorry, Heaton, I love you. I rooted for you all the time. Things are not looking good for NI.